Hello, I'm Senator Maggie Hassan. Thank you to everyone who's participating in the Waypoint SleepOut. All Granite Staters deserve to have a safe and stable place to call home. So it's heartbreaking that many young people across our state are worried about whether they will have shelter and make it through the night, or where they will find their next meal. We must end youth homelessness, and Waypoint's mission is to do just that. Waypoint helps change and save lives, and I'm grateful for all that you do on behalf of the Granite State.
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Pappas here. I want to thank you all for joining this year's Sleep Out in support of Waypoint. For more than 170 years, Waypoint has provided counseling, healthcare, and housing services to those in need, especially children and families. And during today's Sleep Out, individuals across New Hampshire are providing critical support for Waypoint's mission and raising awareness about youth homelessness to help end this crisis. Far too many people across New Hampshire, including kids, are housing insecure. And events like the annual Waypoint Sleep Out help turn the tide by raising awareness and funds for programs that support our communities. We must continue to work together to ensure that everyone has access to safe, secure shelter, healthcare and social services, drug and mental health counseling, and a good night's sleep before they wake up to go to school or to go to work. So thank you again for all your work. And thank you for supporting Waypoint and for the folks at Waypoint for the work that you're doing to end youth homelessness. Take care.
What do you do to contribute to ending young adult and youth homelessness?
Woo!
It's a big one.
As a teen services outreach worker, I work with young people under the age of 18 who are or are at risk of experiencing unaccompanied homelessness. The goal of teen services is to provide intensive support to ensure ongoing safety, stability, and well-being, and to utilize family mediation to reunite them with their parent or guardian when possible.
So at the drop-in, we provide like case management. We make sure that the drop-in is a safe, supportive space for young adults. We also have like an array of groups for young people, LGBTQ groups, poetry groups, and also just mental health and wellness groups, free laundry and showers that young people can utilize. It really is just a space for our young people to come be warm or stay cool in the summer and just be.
What do you do to contribute to ending young adult and youth homelessness?
Yeah, so as a street outreach worker, I work with young adults 18 to 24 who are experiencing any type of homelessness or housing instability. We provide case management, basic needs. We quite literally meet these young people where they're at. So whether that's outside, at shelters, on the streets, like wherever that may be, we meet them and provide all the basic needs that they need. Connecting to things like shelter or food pantries, benefits, we can connect to long-term housing, whether that's through a voucher or rapid rehousing program. Our goals are to help our young people become self-sufficient, stable, and safe in all aspects. We focus on positive youth development and trauma-informed care. I always like to say, like, our young adults create their own path and we walk it with them.
As the shelter supervisor, my staff and I provide a safe and supportive space in a 14-bed shelter meant to serve the most vulnerable population of young adults. We are currently the only emergency shelter in the state of New Hampshire that's geared towards young adults. We are low barrier, trauma-informed, and meet the needs of our diverse and vibrant youth in a variety of ways.
So as a rapid rehousing coordinator, I work alongside DHHS to identify the young people in New Hampshire with the highest needs. This can include victims of domestic violence and human trafficking, young adults suffering from generational poverty, trauma, lack of support, substance use disorder, lack of financial resources, disabilities, and mental health struggles. So rapid rehousing uses a housing first model And this is for young adults who suffer from chronic housing instability who are also unsheltered. Housing First is based on the idea that in order for a person to make positive changes in their life, they need to first have their most basic needs met. Through Rapid Rehousing, we provide financial support for up to 24 months and then optional intensive case management for up to 30 months with the intention of decreasing the likelihood of falling back into homelessness.
What do you do to contribute to ending young adult and youth homelessness at Waypoint?
Our 12 to 18 month structured program accepts young adults and works on life goals, life skills, and activities that will allow them to exit homelessness and enter into long-term housing. With the help of care coordinators, clients are able to navigate this foundational goal while also building connections to other resources in the community. Like our TLP program, we also have a pregnant and parenting program, which we call TLPP. In TLPP, we serve clients and their age-eligible partners who are pregnant and parenting. Clients and families are connected to local family resource centers to learn parenting skills and ensure that children's developmental milestones are met. Ultimately, families work on building sustainable connections in the community to include long-term housing.
Our host home program will connect young adults with host homes in both Stratford and Merrimack County. This is going to be the first program of its kind in New Hampshire. Young adults in this program must meet certain requirements to be accepted into the program and matched with a host home that's inclusive, compassionate, and understanding of their needs. Our host home coordinator will recruit and educate host homes, maintain relationships, and provide supportive case management. Host homes will receive a stipend, and they'll work with the coordinator for up to 12 months, helping to meet the young person's basic needs and provide shelter, giving them a stable environment to work towards their goals. What does this program do to contribute to ending young adult and youth homelessness?
Navigators end youth homelessness by walking beside young people in crisis, acting as a bridge to housing and longer-term supports, ensuring that young people connect to the services they need, not only to survive the night, but to get the things that they need to thrive.
Our department offers on-call supports to young people 24/7, 365 days a year. If a young person finds themselves in crisis and they're seeking support, there is a staff member available to them at all times to triage or get them to safety. We work with young people that are directly connected to our department, and we also work with young people who are not yet connected to our department but are experiencing a housing crisis. On-call staff have a number of resources available to them to help support a myriad of needs and circumstances.
We believe that we can end youth and young adult homelessness. We intend to implement advocacy at all levels, collaborate with community, state, and federal partners, and empower youth to reach their full potential.
I'm Borja Alvarez, President and CEO of Waypoint.
And I'm Erin George Kelly, Director of Homeless Youth and Young Adult Services here at Waypoint.
And as you're watching this video, Erin and I are getting ready with about 50 or 60 people to sleep outside in our Rochester side under a tent. But many of you have decided to do this remotely. So you might be in your back porches, you might be in your yards with a tent. Some of you are doing this with your families, some of you are just doing this alone. But what I want to say is really thank you on behalf of all of us at Waypoint, and certainly on behalf of the young homeless youth that we have the privilege of serving, for raising awareness to the issue and raising funds. It is really important. And I want to thank especially all of our sponsors. So what we're going to do today is talk to each other and probably address some of the major questions that people have about sort of youth experience homelessness. And Erin here is the expert, so she's going to do most of the talking, but I'll do some of the questions. So let me start by sort of the basic. How is it possible that in the 21st century in New Hampshire, a youth ends up being homeless?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, every young person who walks through our door has their own unique story, but there's definitely trends that we see across the board. Young people in New Hampshire grow up in generational poverty. So many of the young people that we see often have lived in unstable housing situations throughout their lives, whether that's family shelters, in a vehicle at times with a parent or caregiver and their siblings, sometimes doubled up in apartments, and so have experienced kind of unstable living situations and poverty throughout their lives. We also have young people who have experienced things like abuse and neglect in their families. Some young people who have been involved in systems like juvenile justice systems or child protective services systems and have aged out of those systems to maybe not having a lot of supports or unstable situations. Also mental health issues and substance use, and sometimes that's their own or a parent or caregiver, but all of those kinds of things really do affect young people and their ability to have stable housing in the long term.
So it's really many paths. I mean, you end up in this situation from a variety of things. I actually was reading an article the other day, and I wanted to check with you, that it is true that many homeless youth end up there because they have substance abuse issues. But I've also read that sometimes the substances come after they are homeless because it is so traumatic and so difficult that they resort as a coping mechanism to that. Is that something that is happening too?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about kind of what it would be like to live day to day in crisis, kind of struggling, figuring out where your next meal is going to come from or where you're going to sleep that night, whether that's outside in a tent or in a vehicle or someplace that's not meant for human habitation, you know, that's a really hard way to live. And for many young people, substances are really easily accessible for them. And sometimes they connect with somebody who might be able to provide them whatever kind of substances are available, and it might give them a little bit of relief for a while. So they use substances as a way to cope with the difficulty that's on the street, and a substance use issue or disorder might be the result of that.
But it sounds like it's fair to say that 100% have some history of trauma. I mean, in any form or shape that they come with trauma to this.
Absolutely. I mean, most of our young people have been in situations throughout their lives from the time that they were born, whether it's community violence or family situations that are volatile or tumultuous. They're definitely walking in our door with some kind of trauma. And then not to mention the kind of trauma that they experience as a result of homelessness. So it's traumatic to be sleeping on the street or in a tent or in your car.
Imagine. So let me ask another question, because one of the things that fascinates me is the playing with the numbers. I've heard all kinds of numbers, and depending on who talks about this issue, they talk about hundreds to thousands.
Yeah.
What's happening in New Hampshire with that, and what are the numbers that we know?
Yeah, so when we think about numbers, you know, there's a lot of different ways that we collect numbers. Sometimes that's through the homeless services systems, sometimes that's through the Department of Education, and we haven't always been really good at collecting numbers of young people experiencing homelessness. And part of that is because a lot of homeless young people just look like everybody else, and people might not even know that they're experiencing homelessness. So we're getting better at collecting data in New Hampshire and really understanding what the scope of the issue is. But the best numbers that we can really point to are that Chapin Hall, which is a research arm of the University of Chicago, put out a study a few years ago. And it was the first time that they really looked at a diverse amount of communities across the country to develop national estimates on youth homelessness. And that study said that 1 in 30 13 to 17 year olds, and 1 in 10 18 to 25 year olds experience homelessness every year. So if we use that number and we apply that to the population in New Hampshire, the estimate is around 15,000 young people every year that experience some form of homelessness.
So you don't see all of them. We don't see all of them because they're really good at hiding, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think when we think about homelessness, the image that comes up in our mind is often somebody kind of sleeping on a park bench or sleeping under a bridge. But for young people, homelessness looks a whole bunch of different ways. So there's young people who are moving every night from couch to couch to couch, or sleeping on somebody's floor, or sleeping in a car, and nobody even knows that those young people are experiencing homelessness. And even that young person might not identify themselves as homeless because they think, oh, I slept on my friend's couch last night and had a roof over my head, so that I don't qualify as homeless.
So 2022 was kind of an important year for your department and certainly for Waypoint. Can you share what happened and what made this year so special?
Yeah, so a few years back, we had made some real goals for our department, and responding to what we were seeing in the community as a need to expand programs. So we made some goals to expand into Merrimack County and develop an outreach team in Merrimack County, and start to work towards opening a drop-in center there. We also decided that we needed to add a drop-in center for young people experiencing homelessness in our Seacoast, kind of Tri-City region. So we opened a drop-in center in Rochester. And we also added a young adult emergency shelter to our array of services that we provide.
First one in the state?
Yeah, so there isn't any other emergency shelter that is specifically geared towards youth and young adults that really is a low barrier emergency shelter that allows young people who really are just looking for a safe place to sleep that night to come into the shelter that day and sleep there for the night.
So I certainly, just adding to that, because I think I have obviously been very involved in this too, because what it's meant is we've actually had to raise $3 million. And we've actually gotten federal grants, we've got state grants, we have foundations, we have individual donations. It's been really an incredible effort. And we're almost debt-free in sort of opening these two centers. But I just want to make a special pitch for tonight, because we actually have to run the operations. We have to hire people. We have to make sure that we're well equipped to provide the services we want to provide. And the SleepOut is really one of our major funding initiative for this department, and crucial. So I think this year more than ever, it's absolutely important. So let me ask you something, because I think this becomes really real when you tell the story of an individual that we're working with, and people understand the humanity of it and make it real for them. Do you have someone that comes to mind?
Yeah. So I would love to tell you a story about a young person who she just recently moved out of our emergency shelter. So Josie was somebody who she had been experiencing homelessness for about 3 years and accessing services in our drop-in center from time to time. And when we opened our emergency shelter, she came in the first night and said, I've been homeless for 3 years. I've been waiting for this opportunity, and I really just want a safe place to have a bed. And Josie's story is one that, really touches some of the trends that we talked about earlier. She was in a family situation when she was pretty young, where her parents separated and she had no relationship with her mother. And she was with her father until when she was about 7, her father was incarcerated. And at that point, she was placed in foster care, and she was in many different foster homes, and then also in group home placements as a young teenager. And when she aged out of the foster care system, she decided that she really just wanted to leave the system and kind of figure things out for herself. And she tracked down her birth mom on social media, and she tried to reunify and rekindle a relationship.
This is after how many years?
Yeah, it was years. So she hadn't seen her birth mother since she was 5 years old. And so at 18, she found her and tracked her down and thought it was going to be a good idea to try to live with her birth mom and really make that relationship work. And as you can imagine, that didn't really happen. That's not how it turned out. She was on the street, living in a tent, with no family and really nothing to kind of fall back on. And she was getting most of her basic needs met through the drop-in center. And then when she came into our emergency shelter, it provided her kind of the level of stability that she needed to be able to kind of figure out what was next. And just a few weeks ago, she moved out of our emergency shelter into her own apartment. So
like her, she's working.
Yeah,
she's
yeah. So she signed a lease in an apartment. And our staff were able to help her kind of move her things in and get some of the things that she really needed to be able to make that apartment her home. And she'll continue to be able to connect with us in the drop-in center and use things like our clothing closet and our food pantry, or do laundry for free, to make sure that she doesn't ever get to the place where she relapses back into homelessness and she can remain stable in her apartment.
It's great when you have these success stories, and I imagine what it means for your staff to sort of see the evolution of someone who was sleeping in a tent for years, and now she's, holding her own with a little help that she will continue to have. That's great. Thank you, Erin. This is absolutely wonderful, and I certainly want to thank absolutely everyone that is doing the Sleep Out, all of the sponsors for your support in raising awareness, and for the funds that, as you can see, make a huge difference in the array of services. Thank you and good night.